Welcome to the Q&A session for the new market. Your team up there doing a great job selling 100 plus deals a month in the previous market. And we're just talking about how things were going now. So how are things going up there for you?
Well, Alex, I'm really glad I'm having this conversation with you on the 27th of April, not to timestamp this interview, but if you had have asked me on the 1st of April, I probably would have I would have been pretending that I was okay. But certainly a different landscape now, a few weeks into the month, isn't it? And I think I just explained to you before, we did 6 sales in April, first week in April. We did 12 sales the second week of April, averaging, 25 sales a month. That's actually quite scary. But the last week, we've done about 25 sales in the third week in April. So, we're definitely starting to see buyer inquiry return to the market. Certainly not exactly where it was in March when we were all flying around the country. But definitely great to see some very positive signs. And with the country, I think, genuinely ahead of where we thought we would be. I think from what I see, and I was talking to you as well, there's some overwhelming positive signs out there at the moment. It's hard not to get excited about it.
Yeah, definitely, mate. The edge has come out of the community a bit in the last week or so, hasn't it? So it's good that that's happening down here in the city of churches and all the way up there in the what's Gold Coast known for? What's the Goldie, the city of?
It's known for unbelievably ethical real estate agents and hardworking people. And also it's known for sun, surf, and where people come to live life.
Perfect. I love getting up to the Goldie and visiting your awesome office up there. So we got half a dozen quick fire questions for you, mate. So let's get into it. Well, one of the first ones was, as you said a couple of weeks ago, very relevant tips for working remotely for agents. But seems like we're already talking about agents slowly getting back into the office and trying to get some routine back. So how are you seeing that space?
Well, I think it's interesting because, I think that old chestnut of I get more done at home, it's easier said than done because it's harder to measure. And it's hard to measure when you lose the professional interaction of an office, how you kind of try and replicate that in a home environment. I think we've all learned a lot of lessons on that over the last 3 or 4 weeks, but I think, and look, there's certainly going to be more periods of time where we are going to be still working from home, so it's still very relevant. But what I've learned is it's that old military style where I think if you get up and make your bed and get dressed, and that's not going to work for everyone, I get that, but I think actually getting dressed for work helps a lot, just in a mindset point of view, because, if you're in your PJs and it's midday, it might feel comfy, but mentally it's just easier for you to be distracted when you're not actually dressed for success. I do think that has an impact, with what's going on upstairs. Making some appointments, I think whether that's not necessarily going to be physical appointments, but it might be a Zoom meeting, or it might be a check-in with a colleague, or it might be some client calls or a vendor call. Making some early appointments so you've got some production early, I think are all good tips. But and the other thing is, don't be too hard on yourself. You're working from home. Don't overestimate how productive you are at the office. Some of us can get a bit carried away with that, but I think that they're a good foundational tips. When you get up, make your bed, get dressed, make some early appointments. Make those appointments the day before, if possible. So when you get out of bed, you've actually got some purpose about your day, and if you start well, you'll normally continue that momentum throughout the day.
Very good tips. I'm glad that you were getting out of your birthday suit by midday over the last few weeks there. Dane,
yeah,
brilliant.
No one wants to see that with a few more Easter eggs under my belt, let me tell you.
And keeping your mindset up and about. I mean, you touched upon that, and that probably interweaves in with getting some of that discipline into your daily morning routines. Any other tips for keeping the mindset up and about as we enter into or in the middle of a lower volume real estate market?
My number one tip for that is if you're going to watch news, only get your news from the Prime Minister or the Chief of Health, because particularly early on, I think we learned this lesson where because we're uncertain, we're anxious, we're in the unknown, we're craving information to take control. But that's probably the worst thing we can do when we overload ourselves with all this overload of information and what's happening in Singapore and what's happening in America and what's happening in Italy. And I think that creates so much anxiety unnecessarily. And if you look back over all the stress we've put ourselves through, we've actually ended up going a lot better than we thought. And if we just had faith in our systems and our healthcare and our government and the decisions they make, and we get on with our business, I think we'd all be better off. So that's probably the lesson that I think we should all take from what we've learned so far, is minimise the amount of news we're watching. Fill your mind with positivity, whether that's a podcast or whatever you might do in the morning. Still keep your exercise ritual, still keep your positivity, whatever that might be for you, whether it's a book or an interview you might watch on YouTube. But just keep that positive going, because negative thought's automatic. It just kicks in. And if you fill yourself with anxiety and news and information, you're going to feel very anxious and overwhelmed. But if you block that out and you start filling your mind with positive action, that's going to make a big difference to your day.
Great tips. And then that carries forward probably, outside of the current COVID situation, doesn't it? They're great tips for whichever market we're in. So, Dane, working in the current market, I mean, you've got a big sales force, as I said before. One of your best months, you did 130 odd deals in a month. So you get to see what the best agents are doing out there, and the agents that are also perhaps more of the part-time agents in the market. So, but what are you seeing that the agents are doing out there to bring some listings forward? There's going to be some vendors that are sort of sitting on the fence saying, "Oh, I might wait." What are they saying, and what are some techniques that they're using?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's a big challenge for a lot of salespeople. Well, the first thing I'd say is you need to get yourself in the mindset that right now is a great time to be listing, and you need to believe that. I do believe that. And I think the best way to actually convey that is through data. And when I mean data, I mean just simply quoting the sales that your office is doing and the buyer inquiry that your office is receiving. If you go back over the 1st of April, and I'm sure you guys are all over this, but if you were to look at your buyer inquiry in the first week of April, and then the second week of April, and then the third week of April, and even now the fourth week of April, I am confident you're going to see a steady increase. In fact, probably not even a steady. You're going to see a sharp increase in buyer inquiry from week 1 to week 3 and 4. And you're going to see, and you can convey that. We've received X amount of inquiries for the first week in April. Sure, I can understand why some sellers back then were perhaps hesitating. We've now seen a massive increase in buyer inquiry. And if you couple that with a massive reduction in listings coming on the market, that creates a perfect environment for selling, which is why we're advising clients who do want to sell now to go to the market now, get an early market advantage, because if you wait until everyone gets the all clear, there is going to be an avalanche of stock start to come on at some stage. Right now, the buyer inquiry is there. If you can beat all of those other sellers that are perhaps waiting for the right time, now is the right time, because the buyer inquiry is actually where it was perhaps in March. So I think if you can use your data to say, well, look, what's the point in waiting for things to get better when it's actually good now? Our office might have done 20 sales last week compared to 6 in the first week of April. So the runs are on the board, and show them with actual sales results and buyer inquiry why now is a good time to go. But that early market advantage dialogue is working well, because sellers actually don't want to compete with everyone else in a month's time when everyone else is going to come on, because they can see the pattern, Alex, as I'm sure we all can, that it is looking like restrictions are going to be going to be eased. So why wait for everyone else to come on when you can go now?
Makes total sense. First thing is to believe that now's the right time. And Absolutely. If you don't believe it's the right time, well, you're probably going to have to advise your clients to wait. So if you believe that to wait, then tell them to wait. But, I couldn't agree with you more, Dane. And one of the other issues that we might face, we just don't know, is that 6 months, 8 months time, when there's no more JobKeeper grants, there's no more bank interest holidays available, there could be some forced sellers out there.
That's exactly right. And that's going to bring, and that's another point that can bring back, sale prices, which will affect valuations, which will affect finance. And that's the other thing too. It's a good point. is if you're a buyer right now and you run a business, there may not be months and months of pain. Certainly for some businesses there could be, but for most businesses, the months of pain are coming. So from a financial perspective, going to the bank with your financial documents, a lot of buyers will be going now rather than waiting, because I think that's from the point of view of you're probably likely to get a loan today than you might not be in 6 months. So buyers actually know that, which explains why there has been a bit more buyers in the market, because they don't want to wait for their financials in 6 months when their businesses might be showing a decline.
Yeah, absolutely. And if one of your neighbours' properties, if they become a forced seller, that then sets the price of your property in the marketplace. So,
Right.
as a potential vendor, I might not need to sell, and that's cool, but someone else on your street might need to. And, realestate.com now and Domain present all the data of the recent sales. So everyone is a desktop valuer out there now. As soon as a new result comes in, you've got a new value for your property.
That's right. Exactly right.
And off-market sales versus full market launch, what are some of the strategies that your team are using to try to, get the sales and build some client loyalty in the marketplace? Are you seeing many transactions off-market?
We are seeing a certain amount of off-market sales. I wouldn't say we've seen an increase in off-market sales since the COVID-19, but certainly that's something that's part of our game. And I mean, that's just what we would be doing would be no different to what you're doing, which is just people who aren't quite ready to go to market now. We often have the weather card here where, right now we've actually got a beautiful period of weather. And I know it sounds so simple, but we had one recently where we literally said, well, look, if we're going to get it photographed, now's the time to do it. Stunning weather, glorious water. Let's get it done now. And I mean, even those kinds of points is just pushing. If you can't quite get the order signed right now and the listing form signed now, the next best thing is getting the photos done and the marketing done, the brochure prepared, just so we've got all that information when they're ready to push the button. That's no different to what your guys wouldn't have heard before. But I think it's actually a really good point. And it's a really good point to keep in mind, that it's just getting to that next step, not going straight to listing and marketing. Well, how about we just get the photos taken? And that starts to create involvement and even trades, all those kinds of things to anything you can do to add value and get you engaged into the process is always a good thing with off-market deals, not to mention actually running buyers through. I mean, you think about it, that's the ultimate reason why someone would come to an agent, which they can't get themselves, is access to your buyers. So even conversations about buyers, and particular, the more specific you can be about buyers, and the needs of that buyer, their names, why they want to buy in the street, why they want to buy that home, the more credibility it's going to give, as opposed to just saying, I've got buyers.
And speaking of those buyers, Dane, there's probably a level of buyer activity in the market where they're just kind of a little bit on the fence. They're thinking they might be able to get a better buy later in the year, and they're saying, no, I'm just going to wait. What are some of the techniques and conversations that you guys are having with those buyers to try to encourage them to move forward? Besides, really knowing the buyers and their motivation is a given, but what's the conversation looking like?
What's really interesting, if you look at our sales in April, there's actually really only a handful of those sales that I would have called, discounted sales, because the sellers just really wanted for their own situation to move on. The rest of them, I'd say probably 95% of the sales we've done in April have actually been really good sale prices comparatively to March this year. So almost unaffected, and in some cases better prices than what we may have got, a month ago. So, but there is the odd buyer out there that is going to try and use this. And I mean, you can take two ways. You can bat them away and defend price and take that approach, which is some agent style. And I've seen that done quite effectively in this market where, they'll just be straight up, and rather than the old feed the greed, they're literally saying, look, these vendors don't need to sell. It's a great property. It suits your needs. How important is getting the right price and the right deal versus actually getting the home that your family wants to live in? So trying to get them to, to see it from the point of view of, well, you're not going to get a deal on this property, but if it suits your needs, then that's actually the most important thing. The other thing is where there is some urgency is I always like the stock market analogy where if we're trying to get an offer from someone, well, look, if you at least make an offer and pricing the risk that you think the impact's going to have based on the next 3 or 4 or 5 months. So if you've got an offer in mind, price in the risk for that offer, and we'll take it to the vendor and we'll give you a decision. Now, that's probably not as relevant right now because at the beginning of April, that was working well because there was this uncertainty about, well, how long are we going to be in lockdown? Are we going to get closed up? All of these kinds of things. But I actually think you'll find now that we can use that to our advantage with buyers. And really what we're saying is, look, we're coming out of this a lot quicker than what we think. 4 weeks ago, that offer may have been taken seriously. But now we're in a position where in 4 or 5 weeks' time, our vendors are actually believing that their property is going to be worth more. So if you can get it at this level now, I actually think you're probably doing quite well because in 4 or 5 weeks, you'll find that every week more and more confidence is returning. Are you going to wait, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, for that confidence to keep building and sellers to keep raising expectation and more buyers to return to the market? Or are you going to pounce on it now and grab it at this level? Because I actually think we could have a rebound of price, and that's what our numbers in our office are showing with buyer inquiry and number of sales.
Yep, brilliant. That makes sense. And we spoke briefly offline before, Dane, about prospecting. And it was kind of a sensitive topic in the late March, early April. It's like, as don't want to have kind of like salesman breath happening, and don't want to be there just to help the consumer. But has that moved a little bit now? It feels like the edge has come off it a bit in the last week. And what are your best guys doing with prospecting? Are they hitting the phones? Are they sending emails? Are they, what are they doing? Rain dance for listings?
I was just laughing because, you mentioned, 4 or 5 weeks ago, it was a bit sensitive to prospect on the phone. So some of our guys weren't on the phone. That's not the reason they weren't on the phone. They weren't on the phone 2 months before that and 3 months before that either. But anyway, I'll leave that alone. But look, it was a great excuse not to call anyone 4 weeks ago. Sure, fair enough, was sensitive. My message now is the gloves are off with that. There's no sensitive period now. We're well and truly beyond that. Make no mistake, in every suburb across Australia right now, there is a war going on for market dominance. The people who came into this experience 4 weeks ago with market dominance may not come out with market dominance in 8 weeks' time. If the people right now, the hungriest agent right now making the calls, if you can pick up 2 or 3 listings right now, you could be 2 or 3 listings away from losing market share, and you could be 2 or 3 listings away from being the dominant agent in your market. So if you own a marketplace, do not rest on your laurels because someone's going to be out there trying to take your space. And if you are trying to build market share, now is the time to do that. And the phone is the way. I mean, we know that right now. We know that this is the time to be reaching out. The great news about prospecting calls right now, and the feedback I'm getting from my team, is that they're being answered. Because if everyone takes this view that I'm going to leave people alone, well then, whoever starts that process earlier is going to find that their call ratio, their message bank, ratio is going to actually be quite favourable. So you're going to be getting through to a lot of people. They're going to be happy to take your call. And let me make it clear, they're going to be very interested in what's going on in the Adelaide real estate market. They are going to want to know what's going on. So if you can be ringing with good news that Ouwens Casserly has now done X sales in the 4th week of April, and it's a serious increase in buyer activity, your clients need to know that to make good real estate decisions. So I would be challenging anyone in Ouwens Casserly this week to get back on the phones to all your pipeline sellers, get back on the phone to even your current vendors, back on the phone to your database and your past clients, and just giving them a call to touch base. No magic script, just to touch base with updating them about what's going on now, because it's actually a lot more buoyant and bouncing back a lot quicker than what people would have thought. And you can give them some new listing information, some sales information, some buyer inquiry information, just a couple of quick bullet points, and you'll find that those conversations will then spark oh, well, maybe we should bring our plans forward. And it's, you know, it's not rocket science from there, but it starts with those phone calls. Gloves are off at the phone. Get back on them.
Great advice. And it's amazing in the current climate. I don't think there's ever been a better time to choose a sliding doors moment where that choice is, I'm going to bunker myself down. I'm going to commit to 20 calls a day. And those 3 or 4 listings that you talk about, Dane, they end up on realestate.com in that suburb of that agent's working. And then all of a sudden they become market dominant because there's been a little breather for a month or two. And then they get called into a whole bunch of more listings. And those 3 listings could set up their career in this next market. And I've seen that happen so many times to agents in the past where they just use this little window of opportunity just to, you know, just put their foot to the floor, a little work sprint for 4 to 6 weeks of just going super hard on the phones, and it can totally transform a career. Have you seen that happen before with some of your guys?
It's happening now in our business. We've got one particular agent gunning really hard in the high end, and he's picked up 3 absolutely cracking listings from another agent. And they are sensational listings. And he's already put one online. 2 are about to go online. And he's already had a call from another vendor that's listed with that same agent saying, well, you've got that one, come and try, you know, come and list this one. So It's already flowing on. The point I'd make is at the time of this interview, WA have now lifted restrictions on open for inspections. No doubt South Australia, Queensland, we're not that far away from that. But I think what the point is, the urgency to prospect needs to be right in your game now. Because if it's not in your game now, you don't want to wake up in 4 weeks' time with all these restrictions lifted and you looking back, having wasted an opportunity now to go hard and really generate those 2, 3, 4 listings that you otherwise wouldn't have got if you hadn't have started phoning right now. Because if you don't start phoning right now, you're going to wake up in 2, 3, 4 weeks' time, and you're going to have less stock than what you would have had, less opens, less buyers. And can you imagine how busy some of our open homes are going to be in 4 weeks' time when people have been sitting at home, caged, postponing buying decisions, postponing selling decisions? They're going to be very anxious to get out in the marketplace. And I think whoever's got the stock and hits the ground running when the treadmill's running hard, they're the people who are going to really benefit in this market. And that the point is, though, the urgency, it starts now. Don't wait for that to happen. It starts now. You can't jump onto a treadmill that's running hard. You have to start now.
Brilliant, mate. So we've covered off on a bit of mindset, prospecting, listing, selling techniques. Is there anything else that your guys are doing that, or that you've seen that's been winning in the current market to help our team out with?
Well, I think the point is you have to make a decision that you're not using the current climate as an excuse to wind back. You're actually making a conscious decision to grow your business in these times. So if you're making that conscious decision and you own that decision and you feel it, well, then you'll do the actions. But if you're still in taking it easy mode, well, that's going to show up in your income at some stage. Make no mistake. So I would say to anyone that's having a bit of a break or has had a bit of a break, now's the time to get back into it. And anyone that's been going hard, you'll know how uncrowded it is on the phone. You'll know how uncrowded it is out there in prospecting land. So I would just say that the people who I think are really thriving in our business are the ones that have actually made that conscious decision that they're going to actually grow in this market and use the time right now to actually shift market share and take on challenges and take on ownership of markets that they otherwise wouldn't have had when the market was running hot previously and it was harder to get into. Use the time now and don't waste it. Don't waste a good crisis. Get into it now and make sure that you're actually growing, not shrinking.
Well, it's a great Warren Buffett quote, wasn't it? In these types of markets, when the tide goes out, we know who was left without their pants on. And speaking of which, it's just past midday, Dano, so you've got your shirt on. Time to go put your pants on. Appreciate it.
I won't stand up.
Really appreciate your time, mate. You're a legend. Thanks so much for your support for OC in the industry. You're a true champion. Thanks very much, mate.
Thanks, guys, and thanks, OC. Keep going hard, guys, and wish you all the best.